These the wise one, who is ever in constant union with the divine, whose devotion is single-minded, is the best. For I am supremely dear to him, and he is dear to me. Sri Krishna here gives two qualifications to be a man of wisdom, or jnani. One who is in constant union with the divine, and one whose devotion is single-minded. When a devotee finds out the truth about God, then God is supremely dear to him, and he is dear to God. The first three kinds of devotees, the man in distress, the jignasu, the seeker for knowledge, and arthati, the seeker for wealth, regard God as dear to them, but it is questionable whether they are dear to God. Of course, we like the person who gives something to us, but it is questionable whether the giver likes us or not. Over here, the giving and taking has stopped, and the relationship becomes two-sided. With the first three kinds of devotees, there was one-way traffic, but at the level of becoming a jnani, the man of the wisdom, it becomes two-way traffic. First, God says that he is supremely dear to the devotee, and then God says that the devotee is dear to him. This is an incredibly romantic thing. If you understand the Sanskrit language just a little, then you will realize this. If you ask a man what type of woman he is looking for in marriage, then the man will say, for example, she should be from a good family, she should be beautiful, she should be knowledgeable, she should be tall, she should be modern, she should be like a supermodel. Let us say that out of the 50 girls he has seen, 3 or 4 match these qualities. Well, that's quite something, actually. When one says the names of the 3 or 4 girls, then he says that out of these 3 or 4 girls, he feels that when he meets these girls for 45 minutes or so, then one of these girls liked him a lot. And then he says that he also likes this girl. The meaning of this is that the marriage is confirmed. It was fine until the girl liked him, but he also likes the girl. That is why God says at the end that God is supremely dear to his devotee, and this devotee is dear to God. Of course, the jnani, man of wisdom, likes God, but this man of wisdom is also liked by God. What is this bhakti, devotion, that we keep talking about? Guruji once read a very nice thing, and he wants to share that. A man was passing through a jungle. He got thirsty and saw that all the leaves of the nearby trees were very moist. He saw that the fresh green grass had grown as well. He thought that if the leaves on the trees were so moist and the grass was so fresh and green, then this must mean that there will be water somewhere close by. If this was not so, then the leaves on the trees would not be so moist, and the grass would not be so fresh and green. This man began looking nearby for water, but could not find water anywhere. He searched for 1 or 2 hours, but still could not find the water. He could see the very green plants. His logical thinking was correct, that if the leaves, plants, and grass were so green, then there must be water somewhere. But he could not see the water. He kept searching for 2, 3, 4 hours, and then thought that if he'd carried on walking all this time, he should have arrived at a town which would have had the water there. Then he saw the small ashram, or hermitage, of Mahatma, the great soul. He went there and asked whether he could get water there, and he was told that he would not be able to do so. The Mahatma pulled a pot of water from the well, and the person drank the water. The person asked the Mahatma that if there was so much greenery in the plants and leaves, and if there was so much fresh green grass in the jungle, then why could he not find water for 4 hours? The person told Mahatma that he was very lucky to find the Mahatma, and that if he did not find him, he would have died of thirst. The Mahatma told him so straightforwardly from his experience that your logic was correct, that if the leaves, plants and grass was so green, then there must be water nearby. And indeed, the water was there. but the water is in the ground, and only trees, plants and grass have the skill of pulling the water from the ground. We do not have that skill. You did not have that skill, and that is why you were thirsty. Trees, plants and grass have roots, and they have a whole system that they know how to pull water from the ground and stay green. If you follow that process by opening up a well, then you will also get that water. But if you think that you should get the water just because the trees got the water, then this will not work. The trees have spread their roots in the soil, and you do not have the skill that the trees have. If you stick your thumb into the ground, then no water will come up. You should learn how to create a system. What the Mahatma was saying here was quite important, because we read over and over again in the scriptures, and it looks logical that God is omnipresent, and so we should see him. But we cannot see him, and we wonder why this is so. God is certainly there. This is said in so many scriptures and in so many Mahatmas that have given discourses saying that the Supreme Soul is there and that there is nothing apart from the Supreme Soul. They say that the Supreme Soul is eternal. It is present. It is here. It is in me. It is in mine. We keep hearing this over and over and over again, and yet the question still arises in our mind that why we cannot see God. If one cannot see God, then there is only one reason for this. This is that those who describe God and those who have given these words have created a system from which they can see God, and this system is bhakti or devotion. Bhakti is attaining God, who is omnipresent, and experiencing the Supreme Soul, who is omnipresent. And out of all the devotees, those who are jnani or men of wisdom have the following qualities. They are in constant union with the divine, and their devotion is single-minded. Sri Krishna uses the word nityakta to describe one who is in constant union with the divine. This can be split into two words, nitya, which means always, and yukta, to be in union. To those who are in constant union with the divine, are not separated with the divine, not for even a moment. Only then can it be called true bhakti. What kind of bhakti is it if one is only in constant union part-time? Our devotion is such that for half an hour in the morning we are devotees of God, and for the rest of the 23 and a half hours of the day we keep ourselves separate from God. People have God in the corner of a small room in their houses. They wake up in the morning, have a bath, and come and sit in front of God for 15 minutes and light a lamp or agarbatti or incense sticks, or turn the prayer beads or offer prasad, such as sugar candy, and then after everything is finished, they pull the curtain on God and tell God to go to sleep. They tell God that they will come back tomorrow after bathing at 8 a.m. and tell God to go to sleep until then. So we are devotees for those 15 minutes, but not for the rest of our time. A man of wisdom is in constant union with the divine. Why are human beings not like this? A common person keeps his power that is there to keep him in constant union with God. His time and his skill are occupied with other things, and therefore he does not have the power, time, or skill to be in union with God. God has given us an ability to be in union with him, but we do not remain in this union. A person cannot remain steady. People are so involved in other matters that they remain distracted. A person was travelling with Guruji on the train once. It was a long time ago. The train went from Mumbai and past Borivali. He had brought some food from home and asked Guruji if he wanted any sweets. Guruji tells him that he did not wish to eat anything at the present time, and therefore the person began eating the sweets. The person then began eating chapatis with vegetables and other delicacies. Guruji kept looking and realized that he had been eating since the train left at 7 a.m. until 3 a.m. the next morning. and that he had finished 3 tiffins. He understood what Guruji was thinking from the way Guruji was looking at him. He told Guruji that he found it very strange that we get so hungry on trains. Guruji told him, no, we don't get hungry on trains. It is only because we have nothing to do on trains that we get hungry. Would this happen if you were at home? No, you would always be doing something constantly. One cannot sit calmly on a train. One begins thinking that if he was at home, then he would have to attend a phone call, send someone a message, draw checks at the bank, or do something else or something else. But one cannot do anything because one is sitting on a train. Yet one cannot sit calmly on the train. As soon as one finds that one has the time, then they immediately begin looking for something to do. People always begin looking for something to do. If you investigate yourselves or other people on the train, then you will see that people, for example, read newspapers, and if they cannot finish the newspapers in half an hour, if they finish the newspaper in half an hour, then they begin reading it again. And when they finish reading it again, they read the words of the advertisements again. If they still run out of things to do, then they go for a wander to see if they know anyone on the train. Why does it matter to one about who is on the train? People constantly need something to do. When a person is sitting on a train, then that is fine, because we can see that they've got absolutely nothing to do. But when this same thing when we sit on the train being life, then what are we going to do? As a result, we fall short of the possibility of becoming one with the Supreme Soul. A man of wisdom, on the other hand, is a nitya yukta, in constant union with the divine. He knows his priorities. The second qualification that Sri Krishna says in this verse is Ika Bhakti, which has 2 meanings. Bhakti, which is devotion of one God, and the second meaning is a deeper meaning, is a single-minded bhakti, devotion. Who can you call Ek Bhakta? Single-mindedness is where there is nothing to hide. This is where one has nothing to hide from the Supreme Soul. First, there is the faith that God knows everything one is doing. Therefore, the person is careful because he performs any action when he sits in front of God, and therefore has no reservations, he has no fears, he has no feelings, and that it would be better if God did not know about this. This is Ek Bhakti. When there is something to hide, then know that distance is created with God. There is some distance. Think about it, whether there is anything in your life that you have to hide from God. When Guruji was young, he read the book Glimpses of the World History by Jawaharlal Nehru. Of course, everyone knows who Nehruji was. During my discourses, this is Guruji's discourses, he often suggested that people read this. In this book, there are letters that Nehruji wrote to his daughter Indira Gandhi. Nehruji himself was in jail during the British rule, and Indira Gandhi was aged 11 or 12. Nehru began his letters by addressing his daughter as Priyadarshi, one who is loving to see, or dear Indu. Guruji always says that we should read these ourselves, that if your children are aged between 11, 12 or 13, then you should give them this book to read, Glimpses of the World History. First, Nehruji's English was very beautiful, and secondly, one can see what the history of the world was by reading this book once. Has anyone read this book? Any chance? This book is quite big at first glance, and therefore the children of today may not like this. By big, Guruji means that one can fit 5 DVDs in it. It is that big, but it is incredibly beautiful. In the first or second letter at the beginning, Nehruji has given a very good instruction to Indira that, daughter, many times in your life you will have the question that whether what you are doing is right or wrong. And it is possible that you may not have a person who you can ask about this, or the event may be that you want to keep that question a secret. How then will you decide what to do? I will give you a very small test. Ask yourself whether you will be able to tell other people that you did this. Would you be able to describe to the world that you did this? If you think you will be able to describe this with pride, then know that it is a good deed and go ahead and do it. But if you think that you will not be able to tell anyone that you did that thing, then stop doing it, because the thing that you're doing is not worth doing. We are the deciders ourselves. If you want to apply this to bhakti, devotion, then you can say that before doing anything. Ask yourself whether you will be able to describe this when you sit in front of the Supreme Soul and say, God, I did this. And if you think that you will be able to say this when you sit in front of God, then go ahead and do that. And you will be able to say this when you sit in front of God, and that is something that you are doing right. But if you think that you are doing this thing and you're not able to mention this to the Supreme Soul while performing your puja, then stop doing it. This will be adharma, unrighteousness. It will be sin. It will be a low act. This is not ekabhakti. When one wishes to hide something from the Supreme Soul, then that is not being single-minded devotion. If we look at it from one perspective, then Guruji has the feeling of surrender very much. When Guruji was young, his grandmother taught him that if he got anything, and if anything new came into the house, then he should give it to God. Until today, this rule is being followed in his family. Anything that comes, be it money, objects, new items, or anything else, it will remain with God for one night, and that it is used from the second day. Many wrong things get stopped because of this. If you're going to get the wrong thing from the market, then think about whether you can offer it to God at your shrine in your house. Would you be able to place that thing at the shrine? Would you be able to offer that thing to God? If you would not be able to offer it to God, then you should not get it. Then one's understanding becomes clearer, that God is not sitting at the temple, but in one's heart. Sarvas chacham radisyan vishta. Even this body of yours is God's temple, and God is sitting in there continuously for 24 hours a day. Therefore, if you cannot place something by an idol of stone, then how will you be able to place it in front of God and the consciousness residing in your heart? This is the root reason behind the principle of surrender. If one does this, then their whole life will be purified. This is ek bhakti, single-minded devotion. Such a person has nothing to hide from God. God says that he is supremely dear to a knowledgeable person. And such a jnani or a knowledgeable person is also very dear to God. Create such a relationship with God and create this relationship with yourself. Create this oneness with yourself. There is no greater path than this. There is nothing more right than this. There is no greater strength than this, and there is no other right apart from this. Create such a relationship with God. When you have a relationship with a common person, then a person pulls up his collar and walks around thinking that he knows such a person. Then if one has a relationship with God, then how will such a person think and walk around? We do have this relationship with God, and that is why we live. But we should create this connection directly ourselves. There is no greater principle than this. There is nothing more right than this. There is no greater strength than this, and there is no other right than this. One who understands this love of the Supreme Soul towards us and also begins going towards the Supreme Soul himself is a truly knowledgeable person. True knowledge is nothing else but knowing that the relationships we have in the material world are illusionary and ignorance, and therefore opening their curtain to initiate a relationship with the Supreme Soul. And once this relationship is created, then it will be permanent. No matter how old our relationships in the material world are, they are not permanent, and they are going to break sometime. This is because the material world is going to break sometime. Sansarati iti sansara. That which is being destroyed at every moment is the material world. The expiry date of the material world is already written. Therefore, the relationships that we have in the material world also have an expiry date. The Supreme Soul is eternal. It's perpetual. It's beginningless. When one's relationship with the material world breaks, and a relationship begins with the eternal, perpetual, Supreme Soul, then if one has any faults in oneself, then God will remove those faults. There are many people who will begin bhakti, devotion, when all their faults go away. However, you should first begin your devotion, and the faults with all those will go away themselves. This is because a relationship was created with the Supreme Soul, and one considers the Supreme Soul as their mother. Now the mother considers it her duty to remove the faults of her son. If a child has become dirty and unclean, then the mother picks up the child and takes the child to the bathroom to give the child a bath. The child keeps crying and telling his mother that he does not want the bath. Children sometimes crying when they are given a bath, but yet the mother gives the child a bath because she knows that the child should be clean. When the child has become clean after taking a bath, then this child is so calm and silent that it goes to sleep. When this happens to a child, then observe very carefully. If a small child is sweating and therefore is itching all over, then the boy cannot scratch itself even there is so much dirt on it. Because the child has this irritation, it begins crying. Therefore the mother picks up the child and takes it to the bath. The mother massages the child and gives the child a bath. The child begins crying, and the mothers do not feel that they should stop giving the child a bath because the child is crying. The mother keeps bathing the child, and when this child is fresh after having the bath, then the mother gives the child milk and puts the child to sleep. At that very moment, the peace that you see on the child's face is indescribable. In the same way, living in this material world has led us to collecting sweat and dirt. We are having a lot of irritation. That is why we keep experiencing uncleanness. But once we turn towards the Supreme Soul, then the Supreme Soul is like a mother who makes us clean. If one is having difficulties and sorrows after performing bhakti, then consider that this is the process of bathing. God is bathing us, and once we pass through this, then you will see that in your life you will get the supreme peace. One has two parts through this gestation period. One does not know while one is passing through this that the Supreme Soul is cleansing him. Sarvana Nigrashan Chadan Tapatni. The purity of gold can only be determined after it is rubbed on, cut and heated. When one passes through all of these things and can give him the label of being pure, then the value of such a person becomes much greater. The same thing happens when devotees, and the same thing happens with human beings. One should have this faith towards the mother. Even though devotee gets sorrows, God is still removing those faults, because now the responsibility has become God's. Why is God revealing all these things to Arjun now? Because of one thing that Arjun told him in the 7th verse of the 2nd chapter of the Gita, which was, Shishyas teham shadimam davat pramanam. I am your pupil, teach me, who am seeking refuge in you. Arjun told God that Arjun was his pupil, and that Arjun had come to God's lotus's feet. Therefore Arjun asked Sri Krishna to teach him. That is why Sri Krishna has had to put so many arguments forward. Otherwise, if Sri Krishna can make one Arjun stand up, then can such a Sri Krishna not also make another 100 Arjuns stand up? And we see during the war of the Mahabharata that the Pandavas won the war of the Mahabharata because of Sri Krishna. Arjun was not inevitable. Another 10 Arjuns could have been made to stand up. But this did not happen. If Arjun had not accepted himself as the pupil of Sri Krishna, and if Sri Krishna had not taken the responsibility of being a guru to Arjun, then there would be no need for Sri Krishna to make so many arguments. Sri Krishna would then have told Arjun to leave the battlefield if he did not want to fight. Sri Krishna would have told Arjun that Sri Krishna would manage the war. Sri Krishna could have fought the war. Sri Krishna could have actually fought the war himself. But once God saw that Arjun had become his, then God could not do anything apart from becoming Arjun's. God is filled with feelings. As soon as God knows that the individual soul has become his, then God immediately says that he is also of the individual souls. That is why God is supremely dear to such a knowledgeable person. And at the time, such a knowledgeable person is also very dear to God. Then does that mean that if we do not go to God, then God does not come to us? God does come to us, and God is with us all the time. But God is waiting for our invitation. There is one quote that Guruji likes very much from the Quran, that if one walks even one step in the direction of the Supreme Truth, then the Supreme Truth walks 1,000 steps in our direction. Then is God just waiting for our first step? No, God is not waiting. But if we walk just one step in the direction of the Supreme Soul, then this is an invitation to God that we are ready. And how big is our one step? Now how big are God's 1,000 steps? Just one step from God is enough to reach us. But this shows God's yearning and God's love. If our one step was as big as one of God's 1,000 steps, then it would be enough. Therefore, 1,000 steps of God are like 100,000 steps of our steps. If such a God has come 1,000 steps towards us, then how close has God come? If we had not made that one small step, then although God had a yearning to come 1,000 steps towards us, but we could not recognize God. If we close our doors and are sitting in our houses, and God is knocking on our doors, then we may think that we should leave it, because it must be the children banging on the doors. We do not even go and open the door. Just one step on our part shows God that we are ready to accept him, and God says to us that he is ours. If one is ready to accept God, then God is there for one. A jnani or knowledgeable person is such a person who has accepted God. Such a person accepts God completely, without complaint, without turbulence. The person tells God that God is whatever God is like. Plato once said that love is the pursuit of the whole. Love can always be there, only if it is complete. We all certainly love God, but we love a part of God, and we love God only conditionally. We do not have a complete love of God. We have a lot to hide from God. It was Kacharal's 25th wedding anniversary. There was a party going on, and a friend came to give his congratulations. He said Kacharal was very lucky to have been married to a person for 25 years and to have so much intimacy with another person. Kacharal took this person to the side and told him, "Please do not say too much. Do you know how these 25 years have gone?" The person said no. Kacharal told him that if our marriage has run 425 years, then it is only because of one reason, and that is because my wife and I have ignored many things. The person asked Kacharal what kind of deal yet he had done with his wife. Kacharal said that there were many things in my life which I thought that my wife did not know, but my wife knows all of these things, and she has pretended for 25 years that she does not know any of these things. And there are many things in my wife's life which she thought that I did not know of, but I knew all these things, and yet I also pretended for 25 years that I did not know any of these things. Therefore, both of us ignored a lot of things, and that is why we are together for 25 years. But such a thing does not work in one's relationship with God. God says that a devotee should have a single-minded devotion, and such a devotee is supremely dear to God. And that, my friend, ends verse 17.